the Xperia Z1, drawing not only from their design prowess, their media acumen, but also their pedigree in photography to create what could be one of the best phones available now. In terms of design, it's hard not to see shades of the original Xperia Z in this phone. Not only does it have the generally rigid rectangular shape with flat sides, it also retains the black slate look, with a strong, admittedly subpar screen. What was once just called the Bravia engine is now the X-Reality engine underneath what is now called a triluminous display, capable of 1080p resolution at 441 ppi. We're starting to get spoiled by small bezels in current top-tier smartphones, however, so the thicker ones around the Xperia Z1's display might be a little disappointing, but only a little, at least for me. Straight on, this is a great screen complementing the darker tones of the Timescape UI very well. When it comes to media, I do still get shades of a small Sony television with this Xperia smartphone. All in all, it's a very enjoyable experience. I certainly had a great time watching the colorful first episode of Planet Earth. I feel the need to explain that while viewing angles might not be a definitive feature of a screen, having good viewing angles is still the mark of a good screen. That being said, the angles on the Z1, while much better than the ones on the original Xperia Z, could still use some improvement. A grayish hue casts over everything when you get steep enough, but this isn't the only thing I noticed. The backlighting of the screen kind of shows up on the sides. Look at the screen at an angle and you can see a white line along the very edge of the screen. It's far from distracting, but it is one of those things that you can't stop noticing for a while after you do for the first time. The Xperia Z1 is one in a long line of new phones coming out with the next iteration of the Qualcomm processor, the powerful Snapdragon 800. Clocked in at 2.3 GHz, this processor is backed by the also updated Adreno 330 and 2 GB of RAM. The Z1 employs it quite well, keeping its high speed basically throughout, from the home screens to within apps. Some smoother transitions in the updated Timescape UI help further illustrate all of this. To be fair, Timescape is a less intensive version of Android than most, so that helps a lot. Gaming is a breeze as well, with every game in my newly acquired Humble Bundle moving along very well and without stutter. Rest assured that the Sony Xperia Z1 keeps up with the best in the smartphone game today. In the hardware department, the Xperia smartphones generally have water and dust resistance, making them capable of braving the elements. The Z1 has IP58 certification, making it able to withstand up to 30 minutes in 1 meter of water. If you're a little clumsy around your phone, it will bounce right back after a spill or a dip. While the battery might be non-removable, expandable storage is definitely a welcome addition, allowing for more than just the 16 GB built in. Call quality through the top speaker was adequate and clear, but not particularly crisp. What it did have was volume, as at full blast, the sound of the person on the other line was pretty loud and clear to others. The main speaker on the bottom of the phone is much larger than was found in previous Xperia offerings and actually translates to somewhat richer sound. Perhaps ironically, however, it does lack some volume and can be drowned out rather easily by outside noise. The Z1 comes with a large 3000 mAh battery that performs pretty well. I was able to get the battery down to about 60% in 6 hours with my personal flavor of usage. This included a couple episodes of Planet Earth, playing a couple games, shooting pictures and video, and performing benchmark tests. The battery should be able to get you through a standard workday just fine, though really heavy power users might have to keep a charging cord handy. Arguably the biggest story with the Sony Xperia Z1 is its very beefed up camera offering. It says it right next to the actual unit underneath the large G for G lens. This is a custom-made Exmor RS sensor larger than most cell phone cameras and is capable of a whopping 20.7 megapixels. The technical information will please photogs, as this camera is a wide 27mm shooter with a very good f2.0 aperture that really helps with low light shooting. Unfortunately, all of this positivity doesn't really translate to the actual app. The newest additions are some new functions made available by downloaded add-ons. These do include augmented reality, or even a social live that broadcasts to Facebook. It's a pretty simplistic and classic layout, with the right side housing the main buttons and the viewfinder taking up the appropriate amount of the screen depending on the aspect ratio. Speaking of which, setting the right aspect ratio is something you have to do in the manual mode, which also allows you to change the ISO, exposure compensation, and white balance. If you hit for the superior auto mode, it automatically picks the 16:9 aspect, which is preferred, but unfortunately brings the picture size down to 8 megapixels, which is kind of a really big bummer. For that matter, the 20 megapixel shooting is rather exclusive, as the next step down from it is a steep drop to that 8 megapixel count. All of that aside, the picture quality coming from the Z1's camera is really quite stellar. All of these shots were taken at the 20 megapixel 4:3 ratio in manual mode, with everything set to its normal setting. Sony proves its prowess once again with pictures that are incredibly detailed and have a great level of color vibrancy. The color reproduction is pretty accurate, and though I would venture to say it is a little on the saturated side, it is just enough to add an attractive vibrancy to pictures and not much else. A high noise reduction makes some of the darker parts of the picture lose a little detail to keep the noise level low, but it doesn't keep pictures from remaining really nice. The video quality is also very good with full HD capturing available. All in all, this is a camera that many a user will enjoy, and especially in the daylight, it is one of the best camera phones I have ever used. And now we come to software, which actually isn't all that big a story as Sony hasn't changed a whole lot in the Timescape UI. It takes many of the tenets from stock Android: the simple home screen, app drawer, soft keys, the drop down with some power widgets at the top, and the recent apps functionality. And overall it gives it a much darker tone. The result is an operating system that is comparably as speedy, especially as Sony's main additions are in the form of many more transitions that help make everything look even more buttery smooth. Sony's own additions make a return here, like the album, movies, and Walkman apps that bring nice media experiences. Other than that, however, the only other real additions to this otherwise classical version of Android are the small apps. These are small overlays that you can use for quick multitasking. Active Clip has been added for quick editable screenshots, along with Gmail. Ultimately, it's a nice looking UI that sits pretty squarely in the middle. There are just enough additions without going overboard, and yet it is simplistic enough without getting boring. Finally, we have the price. While the Xperia Z1 isn't quite available on US carriers just yet, we wouldn't be surprised if it was priced at least at $199 for 2-year contracts. However, currently in online retailers it is at least $750 unlocked. Sony typically offers premium pricing for their premium phones, and this is no exception.
And so, there you have it.
Even if it does miss in a few small places, it's hard not to like the Xperia Z1 as a whole package. The screen is still very enjoyable if not perfectly executed, the performance really doesn't disappoint, and the upgraded camera is a wonderful performer that should even please hobbyist shutterbugs. Whether or not this is Sony finally getting back to the top of the mountain remains to be seen, but personally, I think they've certainly gotten closer with the Xperia Z1.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this full review. Just remember that this is not the end of our Xperia Z1 coverage. If you haven't seen the drop test already, the link is right over there on the side, along with future links to our feature-focused videos for it. Also, don't forget to drop us a like on our videos and to subscribe if you haven't already. And when you're done with all that, head over to AndroidAuthority.com because we're your source for all things Android.